Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and today for Spooktober we are talking about spooky stories and spooky locations. The location I'll be talking about in this video is a little bit cold today because we've got the nasty fall weather going on, but fortunately I was able to film it on a sunnier day. Also, before we get started, I want to address that I will be talking about a cemetery, and some people see people going into cemeteries as like a bad or creepy or weird thing to do. Firstly, this is a public cemetery with a path going straight through it that people walk through quite often, so it's not as though I was sneaking into it. Secondly, I see cemeteries as a place with a lot of history. This perspective likely comes from me being a tour guide in Edinburgh, where I used to take people into two different cemeteries there. One was Greyfriars Kirkyard, where a bunch of those names from Harry Potter came from, and the other was the cemetery next to Calton Hill. Those cemeteries were a lot more full than you might get in Canada, to the point where with Greyfriars, no matter where you're standing on at least 3 dead people at all times, no matter if you stay on the path or not. And people there don't find it weird or macabre to wander around in the graveyard. People sometimes have picnics there. In any case, let's get into one of the stories about the Ross Bay Cemetery. One Christmas Eve back in the 1920s, 2 girls were walking through the graveyard to get from one place to another. It was night, and like I've said, people walk through this graveyard all the time. All of a sudden they saw this white amorphous figure running through the cemetery in the middle of the night with these lights shining off of it. And understandably, they were a little bit creeped out. At this point they ran out of the cemetery onto Fairfield Road, and other people, adults most importantly, reported also seeing this figure. Because people don't tend to believe teenage girls, if this had just been them who saw it, people would probably forget this story a lot easier. But because there were upstanding adults present, this story kept going on. This local legend was being told about 20 years later when a local man stepped in and said that actually he is the Ross Bay ghost. It turns out that at the time he was down on his luck and had bought a bunch of gold paint that he was using to touch up some of the gold detailing on tombstones. In order to make his money in time for Christmas, he had to get it done by Christmas, and because he had a limited amount of paint and he didn't want anything to get in it or anything to mess up his work, he was working well into the night to make sure it got done, as well as working under a sheet so nothing would get into his painting. And he also had a lantern so he could see what he was doing. Well, a gust of wind came along and knocked his paint can over, so he went running for it while still wearing the sheet, which was illuminated because the lantern was also under it. So this local tale ended with a very rational explanation, but for 2 decades it was one of the best ghost stories in Victoria. It turns out that Victoria has a whole host of ghost stories, as well as the province of British Columbia, many of which you can read in this very loved copy of Ghost Stories of British Columbia. That's it for today. Do you have any creepy local ghost stories where you're from? Let me know about them down in the comments below. On the way down at the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!